Good afternoon and good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the Blind Press YouTube channel and another coffee stream episode. It is, of course, Wednesday, which means it's Wacky Wednesday time. And I have some wacky stories for us to go through. Got two articles and a video. So we should be good to go for a nice, good, at least hour of content. So I hope everyone is ready and has some caffeine of some kind. I hope we're all having a good day. Welcome, everybody. So, first, before we get into the stories, I got an email from the YouTube creators team, and they're like, "Good news! We've made it easier to get monetized on YouTube." And me being a content creator trying to get monetized on YouTube went, "Oh, good. This is something I'm interested in." And so I opened this email and they are telling me, "Well, we are going to help you get monetized through shorts. And we have decided that through a 90-day period, if you have a short that gets 10 million views, I have not seen a short with over 2 million, by the way. Anyway, 10 million views in 90 days and 1,000 subscribers within 90 days. Then you can have monetization. Hello, Costin. Gee, YouTube, way to tell your small creators that you don't give a fuck about them. Again. Like, I'm still trying to get, I have 1,752 watch hours right now. I need 4,000. And I've been at this for like 5 years, right? And honestly, like, Pink Hollow and I have talked about it. And if I don't have those extra 2,350 watch hours by the new year, I'm going to have to stop and just focus on real life stuff, because I like it's hard, like it's not just me that does work on this. It's Pink Hollow edits stuff as well as he can after working like his day job. So like, it's at what point should we realize that it's not going to happen? And I don't want to do that at all. Like, I want to keep going. I don't want to give up on this. But I have to be, to do something like there's a point where, you just have to stop pushing the boulder up the hill. You know what I mean? And it sucks because I don't want to do that. But so please, for the love of God, put my stuff in a background tab or something with your volume turned down. I don't know, just give me the watch hours. Because that's the only thing that's left for me for monetization. Everything else is checked. The subscribers is checked, the 2-step authentication is checked, the no copyright strikes is checked. I just need the hours. That's it. And I need 2,350. So let's get this going. All right, our next, let's go to our first story here. I'm going to grab the one that Pincalo sent me. Apparently somebody went to Shinzo Abe's funeral and set themselves on fire. So we're going to read about that. All right. Let's see here. Where's that link? There it is. Okay. Oh, it's a Toronto Sun article. Okay. There we go. It is open. All right. Let's get this shared. Okay. So let's see here. We have from the Toronto Sun. 12 hours ago, Pinkalo sent this to me. So let me just find the headline. Here we go. Man sets himself on fire in apparent protest at former Japan Prime Minister's state funeral. Okie dokie then. The man's already dead. Why are we protesting him? I'm very confused. Why are we protesting someone who's already dead? Anyway, police officers and firefighters investigate at the site where a man was protesting a state funeral for the he was protesting the funeral. Okay, that makes even less sense. Tokyo. A man set himself on fire near the Japanese Prime Minister's office on Wednesday in an apparent protest at the government's decision to hold a state funeral for former Premier Shinzo Abe, who was assassinated earlier this year, the media reported. So this guy's apparently he's I guess not a fan of Shinzo Abe, and I guess doesn't think that a state funeral should be allowed. I guess he was burned throughout his entire body, and he got taken to the hospital, which no shit. Everyone else was left behind trying to extinguish the flames. A police officer was also injured in the attempt to put out the fire, which is unfortunate. This is why you shouldn't be setting yourself on fire. Fire is a very fickle thing. You can't just dick around with fire and expect things to go without a hitch. You know what I mean? Like, even the best planned bonfire falls over and you're like, oh. So, you can't expect a protest fire to go any better. Okay. So this person is clearly upset. He was in his 70s. Good God. He told police later he deliberately doused himself in oil. A letter about the funeral and the words "I strongly oppose it" were found nearby, and the police declined to comment or confirm on the incident. But the incident took place on what would have been Abe's 60th birthday. So yeah, that crazy bastard is a crazy bastard. And 70 years old. Holy shit. That's crazy. Like 70 years old. Why are you setting yourself on fire at 70? Come on, dude. That's a little bit much, don't you think? All right. So, our next story, that was just a quick one. I have found one myself about a space diamond. I figured we would read about the space diamond because that sounds really freaking cool. And then we're going to have a video to watch. So, another weird history video because the weird history videos are pretty cool. And they cover all sorts of different topics. So, but first, we're going to read this article about a space diamond. So this, yes, it is a CNN article. However, it's about an outer space thing, so we'll read it. Okay. StreamYard. I need that share button. There it is. Okay. So this headline is Meet the Mystery Diamond from Outer Space. Interesting. Let's take a look here. So this, as I said, was posted by CNN, written by Madeline Holcomb. CNN updated at 8:55 this morning. So I didn't get a chance to go over this before, but we're going to. Oh, editor's note says. Oh no, screw that. Scientists. Oh, CNN says that scientists have debated its existence. Tiny traces provided clues. Now researchers have confirmed the existence of a celestial diamond after finding it on Earth's surface. Oh, it landed. That's cool. I thought it was big and was still out in space. The really cool thing that I learned about Neptune recently was that it actually rains diamonds on Neptune, which I think is pretty awesome, if you ask me. I think that a planet in our solar system that rains diamonds is pretty freaking awesome. Just my opinion. But you never know. Okay, so this carries on to say the stone called Lonsdaleite has a hardness and strength that exceeds that of a regular diamond. Okay. The mineral arrived here by way of a meteorite, new research has suggested. Interesting. Lonsdaleite. Is that because of the way that, or the person who discovered it? What's more, the chemical process through which scientists believe Lonsdaleite forms could inspire a way to manufacture super durable industrial components, according to the author of the study published September 12th in the journal called Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. That's pretty cool. If we could figure out how to make equivalent material to this Lonsdaleite for industrial components like drill bits and things like that, like just think of the next stage of mining that we could achieve. That would be really interesting. And not just mining on our planet. We could theoretically use these Lonsdaleite equivalent materials to equip our future robotic probes and instruments. The revelation started to unfold when geologist Andy Tompkins, a professor, I'm Sean Connery, at Monash University in Australia, was out in the field categorizing meteorites. He came across a strange, quote, bended kind of diamond in a space rock in North Africa. Huh, said study co-author Alan Sallet, a doctorate student and researcher at at RMIT University in Australia. Tompkins theorized that the meteorite that held the Lonsdaleite came from the mantle of a dwarf planet. Interesting. That existed about 4.5 billion years ago, Sallet said. That would be fascinating, especially if this was from a planet that was in our solar system. That would be very cool. The dwarf planet was then catastrophically struck by an asteroid, releasing pressure and leading to the formation of these really strange diamonds, he added. Huh. With its cutting edge methods and possibilities for the future, the discovery is exciting, said Paul something. A a professor of geology and geochemistry at the California Institute of Technology. Asimo was not involved in the study, but he says it really takes advantage of the number of recent developments in microscopy to really do what they did as well as they did it, Asimo said. This is really fascinating that they've found like not just a diamond, but a different kind of diamond. And it's harder. I wonder if it's less brittle as well, because we know that diamonds are very brittle, although they're very hard. They're very easily broken. So I wonder if Lonsdaleite is the same thing, the same way, or if it's a stronger substance. Diamonds and Lonsdaleite can form in one of three ways. It can be through high pressure and temperature over a long period of time, which is how diamonds form on the surface of the earth. The shock of the collision of a meteor. Of a hypervelocity collision, of a meteor, or the release of vapor from broken up graphite. Huh. That would attach to a small diamond fragment and build upon it, Asimo said. Interesting. And he says that the method that creates the mineral can influence its size. Research in the study proposed that the third method provided the largest samples. So the release of graphite vapor. Huh. Fascinating. That is so cool. That is really, really cool. All right. So that's that story. And now we're going to get to our weird history video. So I showed you guys a weird history video last Wacky Wednesday, or no, 2 Wacky Wednesdays ago, about what's it called? What people ate during the Black Plague. So we're gonna watch this video about what it was like to be a mental patient in the 19th century. So yeah, this is gonna be interesting. Let's put this down one notch. Okay, there we go. Okay, now let's get this screen shared. Oh my goodness, this thunderstorm that's coming in is making my head just ache. Like, it's bad. Ugh. Okay. All right. What did what was it like to be a mental patient in the 19th century? All right, here we go. The hell? Okay, here we go. All right. It's down here in London and it's just ugly. Oh yeah. Well, like I feel like I'm wearing a pain helmet right now and it's really bad like right here. It's yeah. All right. Let's get this going here.
In the 1900s, psychiatric hospitals were known as lunatic asylums or insane asylums, and officials there would lock patients up against their will, despite having few ideas about how to properly treat their problems.
Yeah. It I read or I watched a if we still have time, I'll find the was it Plainly Difficult? The lobotomy thing. I'll find that if there's still time after this.
In 1900, patients at psychiatric hospitals in the United States faced inhumane treatment that today would be regarded as nothing short of torture. So,
Yeah.
today we're going to take a look at what it was like to be a patient in a U.S. mental hospital in the year 1900.
Oh, in the year 1900. Okay, I thought it said in the 19th century. Okay.
But before we get started, be sure to subscribe to the Weird History channel and let us know in the comments below what other medical-related topics you would like to hear about. Okay, hang on. This one is gonna get crazy.
I like this guy. His delivery is funny.
In the early days of psychiatric hospitals, not everyone chose to enter one of their own free will.
Well, it's still that way, but okay.
In fact, up until the 1960s, the majority of patients in the U.S. mental health facilities were admitted involuntarily.
Oh, wow, that high? I didn't realize it was that high. 60%. Holy shit.
By contrast, about 71% of people in psychiatric institutions today are there voluntarily.
Wow, I did not realize that it was that much of a flip from involuntary institutionalization to voluntary. Holy shit. That's insane.
The problem wasn't just with medicine, it also had a lot to do with the laws that allowed families to commit their relatives with little to no supporting evidence.
Right.
In 1860, for example, based on an Illinois law, Elizabeth Packard landed in an asylum for 3 years for no reason other than that she practiced a different religion from her husband.
Well, and a lot of these involuntary commitments were also done to get estates, to get somebody's money, all of that.
Parents also routinely committed their children to mental institutions for questionable reasons. In 1883, Henry Fraser was sent to an asylum in New Orleans because his mother called him uncontrollable, saying that he played with himself to complete exhaustion. Exacerbating the problem were perverse financial incentives for the hospitals themselves.
He played with himself to exhaustion. He's a boy. Boys masturbate, dude.
Is families could literally just purchase confinement for relatives they didn't want to deal with. I can see that temptation. And patients might stay in psychiatric institutions for extended periods. By 1904, only 27.8% of asylum patients in the U.S. had been institutionalized for a year or less.
Wow.
Psychiatric institutions,
let's hear that again.
Families could literally just purchase confinement for relatives they didn't want to deal with. I can see that temptation.
Yeah.
And patients might stay in psychiatric institutions for extended periods. By 1904, only 27.8% of asylum patients in the U.S. had been institutionalized for a year or less.
Holy crap. Basically, if you were going into an institution, you were going to live there.
The vast majority were long-term cases. Given how awful the care was, some people with mental health issues tried to hide their condition to avoid being sent to an asylum. And it's hard to blame them. In 1887, journalist Nellie Bly agreed to go undercover in a mental asylum to record the conditions inside.
Oh, wow. Undercover journalism, even back in the 1880s. Does anyone remember the Law and Order Criminal Intent episode where Vincent D'Onofrio's character went undercover to the mental institution? That was fucked up. Or was it jail or was it the mental hospital? I can't remember.
She reported horrific treatment from doctors, including hair pulling and solitary confinement. Bly also decried the way patients were treated like prisoners. She wrote of how when she couldn't sleep, she would lay in bed imagining how horrible it would be if a fire broke out in the institution. Bly had noticed that every door in the building was locked separately, and the windows were all heavily barred, meaning that escape was close to impossible.
That's terrifying. So if there was a fire, the patients would be basically burnt to death.
A doctor had told her that in one building alone, there were some 300 women locked 10 to a room.
Oh my God.
And it was impossible to get out unless the doors were manually unlocked. By the early 20th century, many mental hospitals routinely tested patients for syphilis. We now know syphilis would remain incurable until the advent of antibiotics.
Yeah.
But in 1900, at the Oregon State Hospital, doctors used what was called malarial treatment for people newly infected with the disease. Doctors who used the treatment, first advocated by Dr. Julius Wagner Jauregg, intentionally injected malaria germs into a patient's bloodstream.
What the fuck? Hey, you have syphilis. Let's give you malaria, too.
Based on the theory that malarial fever could kill syphilis.
All
Wagner
right.
Jauregg's research showed that approximately half of these patients saw a reduction in syphilis symptoms after the malaria infection.
50-50 shots, not really a good percentage there, Doc.
Which sounds pretty promising. However, the same research showed that at least 15% died from the treatment.
No
which
shit.
is less promising, although it didn't stop them from using it. The earliest treatments for mental illness were, to put it mildly, absolutely brutal. In the early 19th century, asylums in England used a wheel to spin patients at high speed.
Oh, what? Okay, let's back that up a minute.
The earliest treatments for mental illness were, to put it mildly, absolutely
That is one I did
brutal.
not know about.
In the early 19th century, asylums in England used a wheel to spin patients at high speed. Other treatments...
A wheel to spin patients? What, you want to make them vomit out their mental illness? Wow, okay.
Still used at the end of the 19th century, included harnessing patients and swinging them, or branding a patient with hot irons in an attempt to bring them to their senses.
Oh yeah, that'll work. Subject them to severe pain. That'll snap them out of crazy. Okay.
You're probably thinking that eventual improvements in medical technology meant better treatment, but that was far from the case. It usually just meant new forms of torture. By the 1930s, doctors began to experiment with new, troubling methods of treating mental illness, which included lobotomies and electroshock therapy. Patients soon learned the only way to get out of the insane asylum was to fake it. You do just what the doctor says if you want to get out of here, one patient said. Of course, while faking it might have gotten you out, it didn't cure you. The same patient we just quoted later died by their own hand.
Yep. Because, and I guarantee you that a lot of these people that were put into these places probably were either very mildly depressed or like there was something else going on entirely that wasn't even a mental illness, or they were just being screwed over by their family. And but when they get out of there, they're supremely fucked up. That's a thunderstorm, Costin.
Mental hospitals around 1900 didn't just treat adults, they also admitted children. Between 1854 and 1900, the Worcester County Asylum screened hundreds of children who were 16 or younger to determine whether they needed treatment. The asylum admitted nearly 200 children, recording their violent tendencies and risk of suicide. One study found a high death rate among the children, who rarely saw their families after being admitted.
Yes, isolate the children from their families. That will cure them of their mental health problems.
Too surprising, given that doctors treated the children in the same way as their adult patients, making no allowances for their young age. Inside the mental hospital, patients slept in single rooms or dormitories. Nellie Bly described women sleeping 10 to a room, with locked doors and bars on the windows. And at the Oregon State Hospital, we know that sleeping rooms were 7 by 14 feet.
Jesus.
The Morning Oregonian reported in 1883 that the hospital contained modern technology, including dumbwaiters that opened and closed as they traveled, to prevent patients from escaping. Ironically, late 19th century reforms had proposed treating mental illness with rest, beautiful buildings, and manicured grounds, resulting in majestic architecture on the outside of mental hospitals.
It looks really pretty on the outside.
So nice, the facilities sometimes even attracted asylum tourists. However, despite the tranquil outsides, the conditions inside the hospital still reflected the idea that patients should be treated as prisoners.
And I can understand why Kennedy insisted that they be closed, because his sister was put into one of these. But instead of pushing for reform, he pushed for closure.
In 1900, the lousy treatment at psychiatric hospitals wasn't solely reserved for long-term residents. In fact, newly admitted patients were often immediately subjected to dehumanizing tests.
Oh, good.
At the Oregon State Hospital, for example, patients had to empty their pockets and strip for a bath. After a medical examination, patients underwent blood and syphilis tests. Finally, they might be shown to a room with bars on the windows and left alone. Women's institutions sometimes used different procedures. According to Nellie Bly, her examination to fully determine if she was mentally ill included a physical assessment, where a doctor accused her of taking drugs. You'd think a top priority for a psychiatric facility would be to make sure everyone could easily tell the difference between doctors and patients, but that wasn't always the case. At the Oregon State Hospital, at least, the standard white outfits could actually be confusing.
Wait. So the patients and the doctors wore white?
According to one patient, neither patients nor staff wore uniforms. The first person this patient saw was a man in a white apron. He thought that person was an attendant, and he asked him a question. But later he learned that that man in the apron was also a patient, and the two were in the same ward. Awkward. During his involuntary commitment, the patient found himself perpetually confused, eventually concluding, usually the attendants are a little better dressed than the patients.
Their white uniforms are a little more white and crispy than ours. Ours are wrinkly and stained. Theirs are, ours are more gray than white. Theirs are still shiny.
At St. Elizabeth's, also known as the Government Hospital for the Insane, Dr. Harry Hummer promoted eggs as an important part of the diet for sick patients, recording that 125 patients went through 17 dozen eggs every day. Patients with epilepsy, meanwhile, received a special diet. According to Hummer, these patients were not allowed to have anything that doctors thought would upset them, which included foods like corned beef or cabbage.
Why would corned beef or cabbage upset people?
And so-called heavy indigestible foods. Nellie Bly described a meal consisting of tea, a single piece of bread, rancid butter, and 5 prunes.
Oh, good. Rancid butter, 5 prunes, 1 piece of bread, and tea. Because that's not undigestible.
After a 10-day undercover visit in Bellevue Hospital, Bly reported, "The eating was one of the most horrible things. However, conditions could vary, and patients at another asylum reported the dining room felt more like a restaurant or hotel dining room.
Huh.
Patients sat together while other patients served them. Some institutions also grew their own food on the grounds, with patients working in the field to theoretically improve their mental health, which also saved money for the institution.
That helps.
State mental hospitals often housed multiple patients in barracks like conditions that were significantly less than pleasant. In the nights before patient Taylor Benjamin, aka John the Baptist, died at the New Orleans City Insane Asylum in 1893, he reportedly slept very little, if any, at night, and was constantly screaming.
Oh, good. A constantly screaming person. No one, like, of course you're constantly screaming. It's a fucking literal hellhole. Jesus.
One patient at the Oregon State Hospital also reported a complete lack of privacy. When he was
Yeah.
resting in his room on his first day, another patient wandered in to tuck in the sheets.
Oh,
He was
God.
followed by two other patients who simply stared at the new arrival without talking. Room service.
Creepy.
Bellevue Hospital in New York featured similar conditions. Nellie Bly reported about a crying woman who begged for death nearly the entire night.
Oh, God. That's heartbreaking.
Another woman repeatedly yelled, "Murder." That's a tough environment to work on your mental health.
Yeah, right? You've got one person who wants to die and the other person, another person who apparently wants to kill somebody. Whoo, boy.
Reformers in the 19th century encouraged states to build insane asylums. The effort was successful, and by the 1870s, most states had built at least one asylum, using tax dollars to treat those labeled insane. The Oregon State Hospital opened in 1883, and by 1936, the state had expanded the facilities to 2 additional buildings. At the time, the institution treated 2,400 patients. Reformers also argued that mental illnesses could be treated by rest and recuperation, which drove the creation of peaceful, manicured estates to treat patients.
The super nice looking things on the outside. This is what I mean. I always tell this to people. Things and people may look really nice on the outside, but they could be absolute shitholes on the inside.
These often included gardens and lawns where patients could walk, and architecturally beautiful structures. Asylum tourism became a popular pursuit by the late 19th century.
Asylum.
Guidebooks even recommended visits to asylums, including the Bloomingdale Asylum for the Insane, which, according to one guide, had one of the most extensive and beautiful views of any in the vicinity of the city.
All right, then.
Doctors believed many different conditions could cause insanity, and sometimes committing patients to insane asylums was their only option. Records from the New Orleans City Insane Asylum in the late 1800s, for example, included notes from doctors that listed some of the reasons they might commit a patient.
Oh boy,
a man
this will
named
be good. This will be good.
Frank Camba was committed because malarial fevers had left him deranged.
All right.
One William Byrne was institutionalized after he fell from a horse and landed on his head, which doctors said caused a softening of the brain.
A bruising of the brain, maybe.
Henry Schreiber's diagnosis was congenital idiocy.
I'm gonna use that one now. I'm gonna use that one. Congenital idiocy. I'm using that one. I'm so using that one.
And doctors wrote he had been an idiot from birth. And in the case of Jane D. Passay, who apparently drank too much whiskey, doctors concluded the cause of her insanity is chronic alcoholism. Good times. So what do you think? How much has mental health changed over the years? Let us know in the comments below, and while you're at it, check out some of these other videos from our weird history.
That's boo. Now if you're ready for more, since we still do have some time. The dark side of science. That's it. All right. Put that in
Scientists
theater
have
mode. Oh. That I would have hated, like, because mental health is already, like, mental illness is already hard to deal with. But when you're in an institution like that, it just makes it even worse. Let's see here. Okay. Here we go.
Scientists have tried to conquer the mind through many different ways for many different reasons. One such is in the treatment of mental disorders. Experimental science has, in some of its most controversial studies, shed a light into how the brain works.
That is true. We have, like, this, that's the one thing about science, is that there has been some really, really messed up things that have happened through science, but they have come to give us some very valuable information.
We've seen this in this very series with the monkey mother, baby Albert, and Milgram experiments. But how about the treatment of mental disorders in a world before modern-day medicinal drug-based therapy?
Yeah.
Around the mid-20th century, a form of invasive surgical procedure would gain praise for being able to tackle the problem of overcrowded mental hospitals and treat the previously untreatable. It would eventually be known as the lobotomy.
See, every time I hear the word lobotomy, I get a shiver. I just...
The surgery would go down in the annals of time as a barbaric and cruel procedure, which would leave behind thousands of patients in its wake with devastating side effects, including confusion, incontinence, seizures, and in some cases, even death.
Incontinence. Wow, that's one that I actually missed the first time I watched this video.
One of the main characters in the story of this surgical procedure would describe the operation as surgically induced childhood. Eventually, the surgery would become synonymous with the mishandling of mental health and the running roughshod over patients' rights. As such, I'm going to rate this dark page in scientific history a 9 on my plain difficult ethical scale.
Oh, wow. That's high. He usually doesn't go that high.
Welcome to the dark side of science. It is the turn of the 20th century. Mental health institutions throughout Europe and the USA have become dangerously overcrowded.
As we just heard from our previous video, some hospitals had 10 people per room.
During the 19th century, where scientific discovery took leaps and bounds, many attempts to treat the mentally ill had failed, leading to a large population of incurable patients. This was due to many industrialized countries having national systems of regulated asylums. These institutions sought out care for patients that had been disposed of in the system by their families, poor houses, and the criminal justice system.
Like, again, like the weird history videos touched on as well, people, using the mental health system just to get rid of their family members or to acquire money, or to, pay the mental hospital to take them. Yeah.
With no proper ways of treating inhabitants of the asylums, many different forms of medical procedure were tested on the unfortunate patients. There are many gruesome types of treatment on offer in the early 20th century. In 1917, malaria therapy was introduced,
as was talked about in the other video,
where a patient would be deliberately infected with the zoonotic disease to induce fever to fight neurosyphilis.
And now we have children being operated on and gender being reaffirming surgery. Yep. Yep. Hello, Wikipedia snippet.
In 1920, the barbiturate-induced deep sleep therapy for premature dementia, aka precocious madness, or in its modern name form, schizophrenia.
Oh.
This treatment used drugs to keep patients unconscious for days or even weeks.
Oh, yeah, just fucking comatose them. Don't actually try to help them, just comatose them. That'll be fine.
In 1927, you might have been given insulin shock treatment.
Insulin shock treatment? What the fuck? That one's one I hadn't heard of.
Used the peptide hormone to introduce daily comas. In 1934, patients could be prescribed with the first type of seizure therapy, where a patient would be deliberately induced into convulsions by the use of PTZ. This therapy would be superseded by the more familiar electroshock therapy. Although these treatments could cause long-term lasting psychological and physical trauma, the patient had not undergone a surgical procedure to eradicate the disorder. But in 1935, in Portugal, a doctor named Antonio Moniz would change this when he performed the first leucotomy on a patient.
Goddamn Portuguese!
The leucotomy, in its most basic form, was the deliberate damage of brain tissue in order to treat mental illness. The name would later be changed to a more recognizable name when the procedure spread across the Atlantic.
ECT is still used, yes. For severe depression and also, I believe, some mania.
Ocean, but that will come later on in our story. The thinking that inspired Moniz was that mental illnesses originated from abnormal neural connections in the frontal lobe.
Okay.
Moniz had seen the after effects of soldiers who had received injuries to the front lobe, in which the veterans would show a calm and quiet disposition. The brain is made up of two types of matter, grey and white. Grey matter is the brain's neurons and associated blood vessels and extensions.
Okay.
The white matter is the nerve fibers that connected the areas of grey matter and carry messages between them through electrical impulses. Moniz theorized that by severing the white matter fibers from the frontal lobe would improve the patient's mental illness.
No. No, that would damage their frontal cortex severely.
Although in theory this might make sense, the connections within the brain in reality are far more complex than what was thought at the time. The grim procedure in its first form would involve drilling holes in the skull either side of the prefrontal cortex and injecting the connecting fibers with alcohol to destroy them.
Bah! Alcohol? What the fuck? Not gray and blue like the Civil War. Yeah, let's pour alcohol on the brain. That's brilliant.
Moniz found this method to not yield very good results.
No
due
shit!
to the solution damaging much more than the white matter.
I wonder why.
A tool was developed called a leucotome, which looked like a long stick with a retractable wire loop inside. It allowed the operator to insert a metal loop into the brain, which was used to sever the white matter by extending and then retracting said loop. The process cut 6 cores in the white matter of each hemisphere using the new tool. Because the procedure involved cutting through the skull, the patient had to be operated on in a proper operating theatre under a general anaesthetic. To test the theory, Moniz enlisted neurosurgeon Almeida Lima to conduct the surgery on 20 test subjects.
And the neurosurgeon said, "Fuck you, I'm a doctor. I took the Hippocratic Oath. I won't be doing that."
Of these initial 20 patients who were suffering from depression, schizophrenia, and anxiety, Moniz claimed 7 cures, 7 improvements, and 6 unchanged cases.
Not great odds.
Although the results were open to interpretation. Moniz claimed that the risk of some behavioural
Butchers.
and
Yep.
personality deterioration outweighed the debilitating effects of severe psychiatric illness, which is understandable when taking mental health care
Shaking my fucking head. Yikes. Right? Oh. Need that like a hole in the head. Yep.
at the time as a contextual background. A second set of patients were operated on due to the success of the first trial.
What success? There was like no success.
These 18 patients all suffered from schizophrenia, and 3 were considered as almost cured, and another 2 had also become improved.
So 5 out of 18. Okay.
Moniz did conclude that patients that had deteriorated considerably from their condition pre-procedure did not benefit much from the operation. In a well-known quote from Moniz, he described his radical new surgery. Prefrontal leucotomy is a simple operation, always safe, which may prove to be an effective surgical treatment in certain cases of mental disorder.
Always safe. Always safe, he says. Okay.
The procedure would eventually earn Moniz a Nobel Prize in 1949.
And most patients
But initially,
deceased. Exactly.
Moniz's new way of treating the thought to be untreatable was widely derided by the medical community. In 1936, Moniz published his results through articles in the medical press and a monograph, but to little attention. On the 26th of July 1936, one of his assistants gave a presentation at the Parisian meeting of the Société Médico-Psychologique.
Yeah, one of his assistants gave the presentation, huh? Not him.
Results of the second test subjects, the 18 people suffering from schizophrenia leucotomized by Lima. This meeting wouldn't go down well, as the lead doctor at the institute in Lisbon, who had supplied the first set of patients to Moniz, was also in attendance and widely denounced the after effects of the surgery, saying that
it was like, no, this didn't work. He's lying.
Patients who had returned to his institute post-operation were diminished and had suffered a degradation of personality.
Oh, that's a degradation, because the frontal cortex, that's where all your reasoning is. That's where all of your, like, all of that stuff is. I think people would just get better on their own at higher rates.
Further adding that the initial results of calmness and improvement were more likely attributed to the severe shock of the surgery, and ultimately from the horrible brain trauma that the procedure induced on its victims.
Exactly.
Many other physicians denounced the procedure, but bizarrely, this isn't the end, as several individual clinicians thought Moniz's leucotomy could be useful on an experimental basis on severe patients. And as such, the surgery was spread throughout Europe and even to the US during the mid to late 1930s. And this leads us down an even darker path.
Oh, good. An even darker path.
It is here that we are introduced to American doctors Walter Freeman and James W. Watts. Inspired by Moniz's new surgical procedure in 1936, the duo performed their own leucotomy. Walter had learned of the procedure after a chance meeting of Moniz at the London-hosted Second International Congress of Neurology in 1935.
Hey, I really like the way you scoop out people's brains. I think I'm going to do it too.
The American was fascinated by the surgical technique. Upon returning to the US, Freeman started communicating with the Portuguese doctor. Moniz, during the...
And could you imagine talking to your friends? Hey, I've met this doctor and he's really great at scrambling people's brains.
Correspondence promised to send a monograph on leucotomy and urged him to purchase a leucotone of his own. Upon receiving the paper on the procedure, Freeman reviewed it and set about with his colleague Watts on experimenting with the surgery.
Basically, he read the monograph and went, I could do that too. Let's find some people to test it on.
Which led to September 1936. Seeing flaws in the surgery, Watts and Freeman developed their own variation, which renamed the procedure the standard prefrontal lobotomy, to differentiate it from the Moniz method. This version severed more of the white matter and would be the de facto method moving forward for lobotomies performed in operating theatres.
severed more of the white matter, as if those 6 cores weren't enough.
Walter thought that the lobotomy could be streamlined even further still. The new standard procedure had the same shortcoming of the Moniz method, and that was access to the brain. You see, cutting through the patient's skull required the operation to be conducted in an operating theatre, with all the trappings, anesthesiologist, qualified surgeon, hygiene, and so on and so forth. Walter had heard of an Italian doctor, Amarello Fiamberti, who had performed the leucotomy by accessing the prefrontal lobe through the eye socket in 1937.
I may be blind, but still. Through the eye socket. No, thank you. Fuck that. No. Remember that Simpsons Halloween special when Ned Flanders became Lord and Master of the world? And he suggests a total frontal lobotomy? Yes, I do.
Fiamberti's method was to puncture the thin layer of orbital bone at the top of the eye socket, and then, much like Moniz's early experiments, inject alcohol into the white matter, or in later surgeries, cutting the white matter with a hypodermic needle.
Oh my God, look! How can he calmly talk about this stuff without... Oh, how many takes does it take for him to read that without going... Ugh!
Walter took this process and modified it using probably one of the most unlikely of tools.
This is stupidly cringy. Not for the usual cringy reasons. I am physically ugh.
It's a surgical tool. Or is this a surgical tool? It's hard to tell, as one was used in psychosurgery and the other is an ice pick. Well, the similarity is not a coincidence, as Freeman's improvements on Amarello Fiamberti's transorbital lobotomy replaced the needle with an ice pick. In development of this new method, Freeman took an ice pick from his own kitchen and started practicing on a watermelon.
Oh my Lord, why? What part of being a doctor makes you think this is a good idea?
You'd eventually graduate to using cadavers. The thinking was that if the lobotomy could be performed without exposing the brain, then it could be performed by psychiatrists in psychiatric hospitals, allowing more people to be operated on.
No, less people. We want less people with ice picks in their heads.
These are the tools used to the Freeman transorbital lobotomy.
Yes, an ice pick.
A new tool called the orbitoclast, essentially an ice pick with markings along the side, and a hammer. The method would involve
a hammer? A hammer? No. Okay. No. Stop. Please stop.
The patient being either under anesthetic or electroconvulsive therapy used to render the subject unconscious. Then,
oh, good. You're going to shock them or knock them out and then hammer an ice pick into their heads. Awesome.
The orbitoclast sharp end is placed under the eyelid and against the top of the eye socket. The hammer is then used to penetrate the surgical instrument through the thin layer of bone and into the brain along the line of the bridge of the nose, eventually going 5 centimeters deep.
Oh my God, 5 centimeters, guys. That's fucking okay. It's a centimeter and a half. No, 2.5 centimeters for an inch. That's 2 inches. That is 2 fucking inches. Oh my God.
The orbitoclast was then pivoted 40 degrees at the orbital perforation, so the tip cut towards the opposite side of the head. After this, the tool was then hammered in a further 2 centimeters into the brain.
Oh my God!
Again, the orbitoclast was pivoted around 28 degrees each side to cut outwards and again inwards. Once this was complete, it was removed and the process was repeated on the other eye socket.
Oh my God, the other eye socket. What the fuck? That's literal death right there, right? And how much pain would you be in when you woke up from that?
The first patient to receive the procedure was in 1946, but once Freeman's partner Watts had heard about this new method, he left their practice, disgusted at the transorbital lobotomy.
I bet he did. Finally, somebody's got some fucking scruples.
But like every other chapter in this story, this would not hamper the procedure's prevalence. The lobotomy had now been transformed from a serious surgical procedure of last resort to a 10-minute doctor's office job. Along with this came a severe lack of follow-up care and monitoring, which led to high relapse rates.
No shit. You're just gonna go rooting around in somebody's brain and be like, okay, you're good to go.
Because of
It's
this,
not like a
towards the
filling
end of
at
the
the
1940s,
dentist.
nearly 20,000 people in the US had received the procedure. But not only that, the transorbital lobotomy would spread across the world and even back to the leucotomy's home grounds of Europe, spreading further still to the Soviet Union and Japan.
Ugh.
To get a lobotomy in its late 1940s peak, you really didn't need to have much of a mental health condition.
Oh, even better. Even better. You could just be like some pissed off housewife or something.
With the treatment touted for all kinds of ailments. The list of treatable illnesses with a lobotomy included, but was certainly not limited to, ADD, OCD, anxiety, PTSD, postnatal depression, chronic pain, Alzheimer's,
Chronic pain. Oh, good. Yes. Yeah.
criminality, and violent outbursts. Freeman, ever the showman, was responsible for a patient's death in 1951 when pausing a lobotomy to pose for a photo,
Oh.
in doing so causing severe brain hemorrhaging. He was even known to lobotomize 2 patients at the same time, one with each hand.
Oh my
The doctor-
god, what a fucking dick. That's not a doctor. They looked up lobotomy scars in the in the making of Planet of the Apes, where the apes cut up up the fellow astronaut's brain.
Even
Okay.
performed the operation on minors, including
On
children
minors.
as young as 4.
What the
In
fuck?
total, around 15% of patients who received the lobotomy died, but many more were changed for life,
Yeah, I
a
bet.
shell of what they once were. For those who survived the ordeal, relapse would often follow.
And then they'd get it done
But
again.
like its first unveiling to the world in Paris in 1936, the procedure didn't go uncriticised. In the late 1940s, as Moniz was set to receive his Nobel Prize, multiple voices in the medical community spoke out on the barbaric procedure.
Hey, this guy shouldn't get a Nobel Prize for scrambling people's brains.
But it wouldn't
what
be the
smart
criticism
people
for the
say.
December banning of the procedure in the USSR, but the synthesization of chlorpromazine, the first antipsychotic.
Right.
As a side note, Soviet psychologist Dr. Nikolai Orozhevsky was quoted saying that lobotomies violate the principles of humanity.
When the Soviets are saying that, you know you have a problem, all right?
And that was from an official from 1950s USSR.
Right. When the Soviets in the 1950s are looking at you and going, comrade, you're taking things a little too far. Perhaps you should not be hammering literal ice picks into people's brains. No? That is a little bit too much. I think we need to dial it back a little bit. Like, holy fuck. I hope he was arrested and in solitary confinement. Oh, probably not.
The procedure gradually fell out of vogue, but Freeman would continue to perform the lobotomy all the way until 1967.
Jesus.
When after their third lobotomy, one of Walter's patients died of a hemorrhage.
Their third lobotomy. Third.
This final procedure would get him banned from performing it ever again. The USSR wouldn't be the last to ban
country of
lobotomies,
gulags, yeah.
as even Moniz's Portugal would disallow the procedure from use. With further developments in drugs such as SSRIs, antipsychotics, and types of therapy like CBT, the need for surgical intervention slowly faded away. And by the 1980s, lobotomy became a thing of the past.
By the fact that it took till the 80s to get that going. I was 2 in 1967. Oh, wow.
Now, how would you rate the lobotomy on my ethical scale?
10.
1 being good and 9 being pure
Or
cruelty.
9.
Let me know in the comments. This is a plain little production.
I would put that as a 9. That's for sure. That's for sure. I would definitely put that at a 9. Ugh. Oh, that's fucking horrifying. That's just horrifying. All right, guys, this storm is making my head go thump, thump, thump. So I'm going to go and drink some water and take some Advil. I will be back tomorrow on Twitch with the Beat the Blind Girl stream. And I think Pink Hollow is almost done editing the episode 4 review for Rings of Power. So that should be out soon. And I will be back here on Friday at noon. So be sure to come by Twitch tomorrow night and back here Friday at noon. Thanks for watching. Bye, everyone.